You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 140 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good brother, good friend, and the man that runs our Twitter page. That's right, it's Liam. Liam, welcome to episode 140 of the DCAU Review.
That's right, we are still vacationing in the lovely city of Metropolis this month.
It's so bright.
Of course, as we mentioned last week, this year does in fact mark the 25th anniversary of Superman the Animated Series debuting on TV, so I'm sure we'll get through a lot of Superman this year, but this month we're kind of sort of fell into this idea of focusing on some of the first appearances of some of Superman's rogues gallery that we had yet to cover, and we have another one like that on tap with the debut of everyone's favorite character, Luminous, aka Lightner, and in the episode Target.
There we go. As we alluded to last week, if you listened to it when we talked about Mr. Mixie's Spitlick and then previewed this week's episode, this was an episode and its subsequent sequel where for some reason they had these in heavy rotation on Kids WB. It felt like once every 4 weeks or 6 weeks, this episode seemed, or its sequel seemed to pop up once they had debuted. Of course, this episode originally debuted on September 19th, 1997, and then I feel like it was played every 6 weeks after that. Liam, before we get into our review for this week's episode, as we always do, you have ready to go our Internet Movie Database official synopsis for this week's episode.
That's right, and this is for the episode Target, which was written by Hilary Bader, directed by Kurt Gaeta, with music by Lolita Ritmanis, and animation by Coco/Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. Lois Lane finds herself marked for death by an unknown stalker.
That's it?
That is it.
Okay. That they did not go deep into the description there on that one, so it's up to us to fill out the rest of it, Liam. So let's jump into our plot as we go through here, and so we open on what appears to be some sort of award ceremony that we learn Lois is nominated for, along with several other writers, one additional fellow that apparently does some work for the Daily Planet as well. Sort of a Pulitzer stand-in maybe, or like some sort of writing award that she's been granted. And she's nominated, we learn, for a piece that she did on some LexCorp scandal that has happened. And as they're announcing the names, she unfolds her napkin, and there's a message written on it that says, "You win, you die." And wouldn't you know it, her name is called, and she is then going up on stage to accept the award. And well, this is the first time out of many times in this episode that we see somebody is out to get Lois.
Yeah, and we'll probably talk more about the specifics of the various death traps when we get to visuals and animation, certainly. But yeah, that is they create a very interesting mystery throughout the rest of the episode, as Lois is, as you said, almost killed by this. Thankfully, Superman happens to hear, or Clark Kent, who is in attendance with her, happens to hear something doesn't seem to be right. He uses his X-ray vision and notices a laser is slowly cutting through a something that's holding up this giant display piece that's about to fall on Lois. And yeah, then from there it's sort of a series of various death traps that Lois is avoiding. He tries to kill her with an elevator. He tries to kill her with a car, with an out of control car, and then sort of the other thing is, of course, we're trying to figure out, it's a mystery, who's doing this, who's trying to kill her. Is it Lex Luthor, because the technology found underneath her car by Superman, in fact, was made by LexCorp? Is it her journalistic rival, Julian Frey, who, as you mentioned, was up for the same award, and once Lois has to kind of go into hiding, we find out that he's actually starting to take on some of her assignments as well. Or could it in fact be a certain detective named Kurt Bowman, who, if you have seen some other episodes of the series, he may or may not play a part, but certainly has a certain vibe to him. He's sort of a soiled cop. They don't get into specifics, but it's mentioned that Lois had also written an expose about corruption in the Metropolis Police Department, and that had cost him a promotion. So we get quite a few different options for who it could be, but one by one those suspects kind of fall away, and we find out that in fact it was the informant who had helped Lois write this original expose. Edward Lightner is in fact the one who had been devising all of these bombs. And why is that, Cal? It's because he's an incel.
A simp before simps were things, right?
He's simping for Lois Lane. He didn't help Lois expose LexCorp because the truth was important or because innocent people were going to be hurt. He did it because he had a crush on her, and when she didn't reciprocate or even notice his feelings, he decided to murder her.
Eddie, why are you doing this? What have I ever done to you?
That's just it. You never did anything for me. And I risked it all. My job, my reputation, my research. I knew what would happen if Lex found out.
You blew the whistle because it was the right thing to do.
Wrong. I blew the whistle because I wanted you to notice me. You didn't. But you will now.
Daddy was a black belt.
You're an unusual woman, Lois. That's why I've taken unusual measures.
In very elaborate ways.
We say this all the time, but it's a tale as old as time, Liam. I mean, and it's certainly one that has gained more popularity in the last, I don't know, probably 5 years or so with the advancement in technology and perpetuation of the internet. But it kind of is one of those stories, looking back at it now, you didn't probably realize or understand the depth or the sort of on-the-nose storytelling that they would have there. I guess this sort of maybe at the time was more akin to a creepy thriller movie or, an obsessed person that is going to come after and kill somebody because they won't reciprocate their love. But it's really more relevant now than it ever has some, 24 or so years later after this thing debuted.
Oh, yeah. And you would think it's just this idea of this weird person obsessed with her. But to the point when we get to the end of the episode, Lois, had no, it wasn't like he was rejected by her.
Right.
Right? He just imagined this romance with her, and then when she didn't notice him, he decided the only recourse was not to reveal his feelings or to try to move on with his life. It was to try to kill her with these incredibly elaborate death traps, and he always gives her a little bit of time, which, of course, the answer is, well, there needs to be time before the bomb goes off or whatever, so Superman can get there to save her. But they do try to justify it within the episode of he really wanted her to have this dread and really wanted her to suffer and know that she was about to die before she died.
Look, Kent, I'm not worried. You shouldn't be either.
And now a very special request.
Is there anything else on?
Aldoverdi's version of You Win, You Die.
It won't change.
Dedicated to Lois Lane. Yes, Lois, you. What a shame that an innocent party like Mr. Kent must also suffer, but you never were one to let an innocent stand in your way.
The psychology of that, from what I've heard and watching true crime stories and stuff like that, is the idea that the person that is perpetuating these situations wants to have some sort of control over the person, and the fact that that their victim never even noticed them at this point, they have to give them the attention that they're seeking. So psychologically, as far as comparing it to a real world creepy scenario that has certainly happened multiple times in real life, it's spot on for that. He's a creep that for whatever reason wasn't. She acts completely off guard in this story, as you said. So it's like she comes out of left field that she didn't even know. So whether he didn't have the confidence to, or just didn't have the wherewithal to be able to express his feelings to her, or just assume that she would stumble into love with him. I don't know, based on their contact. I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting that this has such real world connotations, especially, certainly more recently than maybe it did at the time that this was written. But there's a lot of interesting. I think as far as the plot is concerned, to me, and it's interesting that we mentioned Detective Bowman shows up in this episode. There is a little bit more intrigue, and it's more. I don't think we don't have Superman doing as much investigation as we do in this episode as it is a Lois. Lois is doing her own investigation, so it's sort of like a companion piece to that late Mr. Kent style episode where we see Clark Kent doing his investigative work and having to figure out who this person was that had it out for him. And the flip side of this on this episode is, okay, so Lois is trying to uncover, as she's sort of being victimized and attempting to be killed here, she has to really put on her reporter investigator hat and try and figure out, okay, of these suspects, of these people that are in my life that have a reason to be killed. It's funny, Detective Bowman even makes the comment, make a list of people that want you dead, but do me a favor, keep it to one page, as if obviously she has made plenty of enemies here. So is it Lex? Is it Bowman? Is it Lightner? Is it is it her colleague Julian? Like we don't know. So the fact that we see that aspect of it, I thought that was really unique and a good storytelling way of telling this story.
Yeah, to your point, it is a mystery, not unlike ones we've seen in other episodes we've covered, but it does manage to be unique. And also, I think by telling it from Lois's perspective, obviously she isn't indestructible, she isn't a superhero, so her dealing with, her own vulnerability of not knowing who it is, of knowing that this person could be coming for her any time, but her journalistic instincts, her need for the truth, still driving her even when she's putting herself in danger. I think that's like a really classic Lois Lane type motivation and motif for her in this episode, where even though she knows she's putting herself in danger and there's always the chance Superman won't get there this time, certainly at the end there when she goes to confront Lightner, once she kind of pieces together that it must have been him after Clark tells her that one of their colleagues, Angela Chen, called to congratulate her after hearing about the award on the news. She realized that Lightner couldn't have possibly known about the award, as he had talked about being locked up in his laboratory with no TV or radio. So
I just hate this. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I feel so helpless.
Why don't you just relax?
I can't relax. I feel like I should be out there doing something, not sitting here wondering what everybody else is up to. It feels wrong.
Why? Let other people take the risks for you for a change. The world can get by without Lois Lane for a couple of days.
Yeah, just enough time for Julian to steal all my stories and my byline.
Oh, by the way, Angela Chen called.
She heard about your award on the news last night and wanted to congratulate you.
On the news, huh? Clark, maybe you're right. Let everyone else take care of things.
That's the spirit.
In fact, I think I'll go relax in a nice hot bath. Right now. See ya.
Yeah, she really gets to shine her detective powers of deduction type skills that she has there, and putting that, because it's a and if you pay attention, and obviously we have the benefit of hindsight of watching this episode, but he says that in the very first scene that they have interaction, that he compliments her and congratulates her on winning this award, and then later on she's triggered to remember that and asks him sort of subtly, she's trying to do it subtly, she doesn't come at him and say, I know that you're the person because of what you said, she just sort of subtly asks him, hey, do you have a TV or a radio in here? Why not? And then, to his credit, Lightner quickly figures out that he's unfortunately set his own trap there to reveal who, and fallen into his own trap to reveal that he's the person out to get her.
You certainly have the most amazing collection of gadgets. But no TV, no radio?
Never. They're a wasteland of call-in drivel and news trivia. It would just break my concentration.
What is it?
You know, don't you?
Know what?
Tell me, Lois, how did you figure it out?
You congratulated me on my award, remember? If you were cooped up in this lab all night with no TV, no radio, then how did you know I'd won the Excalibur?
Such a clever girl.
Yeah, and I think I really love the way this is all crafted. I will say the last little bit here, and I think it's more just because it's still a kid's cartoon and you need Superman to punch somebody at the end. Right. I feel like the hologram and laser belt that he puts on, the force field generator powered by a red sun that allows him to go toe-to-toe with Superman for a minute at the end, that feels like super tacked on, and I feel like it doesn't, I don't know, it's weird to say it breaks your immersion in the story about Superman, but it's like, it's such like a weird, like as we said, like this grounded, mystery thriller piece, and then it goes very super villain at the end there. Well,
and comparing it to, can't help but compare it to the late Mr. Kent episode, just because of the format and the style of the episode. But comparing it to that, I think we said the same thing when that, Detective Bowman has to get in a helicopter and start shooting at Superman from a police helicopter. It's like, what is this? How does this happen? Like, how did we get here? So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and again, you can nitpick it now. It's like, oh, well, maybe it could have just been like other death traps that Superman had to work through to get to Lois, because she's in this like laser cage, and the laser bars are closing in around her.
They're electrified to the point
where Superman can't just walk through them or whatever he needs to. So yeah, maybe they could have found another way to slow Superman down, and it could have been more of a race against time thing as opposed to him literally fight going fist to fist with Lightner at the end there. But that being said, I still think it's a really, really strong story, and like I said, for the focus on Lois and how good her characterization it was in this episode, I gave it a very strong 9 out of 10.
Nice. I'm just a tick lower. I went 8 out of 10, which I very much surprised me based on how much I feel like I despise these episodes. But I think for the story itself and the writing and everything that we've talked about, it fits really well, especially if this is the first time that you've ever seen this episode. If you hadn't seen it in a while, I did not remember all of the moving parts as far as the red herrings that they put in there, as far as the other suspects of who could be. That wasn't something that I remember. I guess, not having I guess just from seeing it so many times and just having the disdain from it, not remembering that was elements that they put in there, and having that more critical eye of looking at it as we do here in our reviews. I will say, I guess the only excuse, or the only thing that I would say that why they thought they had to tack this suit thing on at the end was that they knew that they were bringing him back in 4 episodes or whatever it was later, and they had to make him somewhat of a threat. And you have a little bit of foreshadowing with the Red Sun technology, because that's a huge part of that follow-up episode, obviously. For sure. So I guess that's why. And it's hard. We've talked about that too, especially when we've reviewed these episodes. It's hard to make somebody a physical opponent for Superman, especially that's not an alien or somebody in a robot battle suit. Right. So how do you make somebody a physical threat to Superman? You have to do something kind of off the wall, zany, bend the rules of sci-fi. So I don't disagree with you. It did feel very out of place at the end here, and you're right. I think they could have done something else. He could have had a trap set up for Superman, or something that would have prevented him from simply just using his fists to figure it out, which he ultimately does. But a strong score either way from both of us as far as plot's concerned.
Absolutely.
All right, well, now let's move on to visual and animation. I think you said Coco and Dong Yang were the animation studios that did this episode. Visually, as far as being on model, I didn't find anything too far off model. We do get some different character models. Here, some new colors or different colors. I think we've seen a few of them before, but what stood out for you as far as this week's episode and visuals and animation are concerned?
I think definitely the stuff that stands out to me is the various death traps that we find out Lightner has created for Lois. We mentioned the first one is just like a laser fraying the ropes of this giant display. That sort of, it's a bigger version of the award that
an Excalibur sword.
Yes, it's a big like jade sword, and as it comes crashing down, Superman zips in at the last second and kind of covers Lois. And
a very similar visual to the one that I think that we talked about in where he does to Lana.
Right, yes.
Where he covers her over sort of on top of her, which was a Fleischer cartoon-esque type visual too, where he stands over top of him, sort of covering her to protect her from the doom that is falling from the sky.
Oh yeah, definitely good call with that. So that's definitely fun. The whole sequence where her car is kind of out of control and speeding across the highway. I thought the animation, the way they kind of show it, they show a lot of like POV shots from like the hood of Lois's car as it's weaving through traffic and nearly hitting vehicles, and they take like this sharp turn off onto like a service route and end up on another highway, and Clark goes flying out of the car, and then of course Superman shows up at the last second to save her and pluck the car out of the air. But yeah, I think the death traps are really what stand out to me from this episode.
Yeah, I would not disagree with you on that. I think one of the things I love talking about, car chases are something that they seem to have a lot of fun with no matter what show it is that we're watching. Those are usually storyboarded and then animated very, very well. The action there seems to be fun. I would say visually there's not a lot of excitement to be had. I sort of alluded to, we get some different character models than we're used to. We get Lois in blue instead of her trademark purple or her alternate red and black look. We get Clark. He's sort of wearing a Bruce Wayne-esque, like, tan greenish.
Yeah, it's like a tannish suit with a black tie.
Yeah.
I don't know if that tie goes with that. But I'm not an expert in that.
It's like khaki-ish style suit. I think we had seen that maybe once before because I feel like we commented on it, but typically not. Typically we get Clark in his blue, which is interesting because typically in cartoons you see the character models and they stay the same colors just for ease of transition and animation. So it's nice to see that, it's not Bruce Wayne who wears the same suit literally every single episode that he's in Batman the Animated Series, So nice to see some change-ups there as far as their visually. I don't think Lightner in this episode is anything visual. Visually, he's not an interesting villain. I did want to mention that Julian, the associate, her colleague, Lois's colleague, that also works for the Daily Planet. Apparently, he just wears tuxedos everywhere. Because he's seen in the opening scene, which Lois and Clark are wearing formal wear, and it's clearly a very dressed up. It's an award ceremony, so everybody's dressed up, in their Sunday best, as the Joker would say. And then later on, he bumps into Lois at the Daily Planet, where they sort of lay the groundwork that maybe he is the person behind these death traps set for Lois, and he again is wearing his tuxedo. So the man just wears a tuxedo wherever he goes.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because as you mentioned in that award scene, Clark and Lois in their formal wear as well. So we get a lot of different alternate character designs. But yeah, it was funny that he's just like days later still in that same tux, it appears.
And of course that appearance leads to one of the other more interesting death traps in the episode, which is Lois getting into a rocket propelled elevator.
Yes.
Which blasts through the roof of the Daily Planet, crashing into a helicopter. Man, what are the chances?
Great.
You're not safe, Lois. Not outside, not in your car, not even here at work. I'll give you exactly 1 minute to prepare to meet your maker.
Yeah, that's actually a really fun little sequence because that's as far as like giving Superman something to do besides just catch Lois when she's falling in this episode. He has to basically wait on stopping Lois from soaring away in the elevator. He has to catch the pilot and the co-pilot who both fall out of the helicopter and then basically stop the helicopter with his feet, and he kicks it off, and wouldn't you know it, for the 97th time, a flying vehicle crashes into the Metropolis River. It's just there's more metal wreckage in that water than water at this point, I have to assume.
Well, it's funny. We always talked about that growing, like even as children, we always joked about that, like just that the rivers of Gotham or the rivers of Metropolis are just filled to the brim with various different discarded vehicles, because Superman just always throws stuff there: robots, helicopters, cranes, planes. It doesn't matter. Superman just he's got it. He's going to discard it into the body of water that runs through the city of Metropolis.
That's right. So I always like to point that out when that happens in an episode. Cranes, helicopters, planes, anything, just metal wreckage everywhere in that water.
That water's got to be real polluted.
Yeah. Surprise! Aquaman didn't show up to deal with that. So worried about. I don't even remember what he's mad about in Justice League. But
fracking, I think.
Yeah, a nuclear sub spills or something. Man, you'd think all that like fuel and oil and whatever spills and toxic metals spewing into the bays, which bleed into the oceans. You'd think that would be a problem that he might want to address as well at some point. Maybe once he was in the Justice League, he like had a heart-to-heart with Superman. He's like, "Can you please stop? Can you please stop throwing vehicles into the water?
Right.
It's really a problem.
You're really, really killing all of the ocean life."
A lot of my friends are dead.
Right, thank you.
But
all
anyway,
right, moving on. No, but as far as like the rest of the episode, there's not a lot visually that's interesting. There is a dream sequence that Lois has where there's a masked individual that sneaks into her house and hurls her over the edge of her penthouse apartment balcony. That's some tension, but we learned quickly that there's nothing. It's animated well.
Yeah. It's again has like a POV shot of her just like falling down. Like when you hit the ground, they even like threw in a little sound effect of her actually hitting
for sure
before she snaps back awake. So yeah, definitely some cool stuff. The Lightner fight at the end, I think it is cool. Like they kind of establish it's this force field, so when Superman's punching Lightner, like energy is like flying off and like shooting out the roof of the place, and as Superman sort of starts to knock him back, and then he shoves him into the laser energy bars and shorts out his system. So it's a cool fight. So there's definitely some cool stuff. The design of all the death traps I enjoyed. I gave visuals a pretty strong 8 out of 10.
Nice. I went 2 ticks lower on it just because I didn't feel like, and I don't think there's a disagreement alarm needed for this, but I wasn't overly blown away or impressed by the visuals. I thought maybe that they could have done a little bit more. Yeah, the death traps are fine, but it's an elevator, rocket powered elevator. It's a car. There wasn't anything super unique. I will point out also that a lot of the technology in Lightner's lab seemed to be Fleischer era Superman inspired. They're
very 40s sci-fi.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. So they did do some nods here and there to Fleischer Superman, which always gets a smile out of me.
Absolutely.
But I think that there could have been more. It's just so much of this was relied on the actual story and the storytelling as far as visuals were concerned. It was hard for me to give it a higher score than 6.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I think my higher score more comes from just the technical aspects, the good work done by Kurt Gaeta as the director and Coco / Dong Ying as the animation company, especially in, like I said, that car sequence and Lois falling and all that. So yeah, definitely not the most spectacular episode, but I thought the technical achievements of the director and storyboard artists and everyone, they did a heck of a job with what they were given.
Hey, that's fair. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which will be music. And we've talked about it a couple times as we've reviewed this. WB has released one single soundtrack collection for Superman the Animated Series, which is a smattering of episodes from across all 3 seasons. But does not include this episode, so this is not one that you can really tune into and listen to these particular pieces. I think Lolita Ritmanis was responsible for the music for this week's episode, but we aren't able to really listen to these pieces in isolation, so it's hard to really listen and appreciate them in their original form. I will say that I think that the car scene, the scene where Lois's car is sort of hijacked by this technology, I thought that the music in that scene really builds the tension, especially once Clark falls out of the car. I thought that it really kicks in, really creates some good tension for that scene. Certainly the final scene with Lois in the death trap where these lasers are closing in on her, and it's really time sensitive as Superman's kind of somewhat getting his butt kicked, at least for the first few moments of the fight. It's the music sort of supplies some tension there as well. But other than that, in a few places maybe where the Superman animated theme comes in, I didn't have too many notes here for music. What about you? Yeah,
the dream sequence, I thought there's some pretty good like thriller, ominous, eerie music, coming to a big crescendo as Lois falls was really well done. And as you mentioned, I think after he saves her from the elevator one, she sort of remarks, I'm just not having a good day, and they sort of fly away, and we hear the Superman theme kind of played very like softly and like sympathetically, I guess, which I thought was clever. Yeah, definitely weaved the Superman theme in well throughout the episode. As you mentioned, it's tough. It's tough to really isolate the good work being done by these composers when we aren't able to hear just the soundtrack on its own. But I gave it a 6 out of 10. I enjoyed it. I think it adds to it, but nothing particularly spectacular stood out to me in this one.
Yeah, I gave it a 7 out of 10. I think I was prepared to give it a 6 out of 10, and then really thinking about that car chase sequence, I think that the music really did well in that sequence, particularly to stand out. It's a shame, as we always say. It's a shame that these haven't been properly released in the ability to sort of appreciate them standing on their own. Maybe 25th anniversary of Superman, the animated series, will bring about another volume of this Superman soundtrack. As they eventually did release all of the music from Batman the Animated Series across multiple volumes. So here's hoping that we get some maybe in the year 2021.
Definitely.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our final category of the day, which is going to be voice acting. So we have, of course, some of our standards for the series, but we also have a couple of familiar voices that you may know from other animated series.
In fact, we do. First, we'll mention, as we mentioned, Lois's journalistic rival, Julian Frey, played by Jonathan Harris, who folks might know from the original Lost in Space series, as well as doing a voice in A Bug's Life. Again, he's just kind of there to be one of the weird guys. He's just kind of this pompous, slightly British guy. I don't know. He has kind of an indistinct... somewhere in that neck of the woods accent that he's good, but it's just kind of a random, like we said, a red herring there. We have Eddie Barth, of course, returning, or not returning, because technically this episode aired first, even though we don't review the Superman episodes in order, but who we've talked about previously in The Late Mr. Kent as Kurt Bowman, this, as we mentioned, this sort of soiled, dirty cop who was exposed by Lois Lane at one point in the past, and he only has a few scenes, but it is great to have a little bit of world building there, that this guy who they float him as a suspect in this episode, and then it turns out to not be true. But there is also just this like unanswered scene of where Lois wakes up from her nightmare and he's just on the building across from her apartment staring at her.
What really laying the groundwork for what a creep this guy is.
Absolutely. So it's
he really deserves that gas chamber.
Oh my god. Oh man, I forgot about the gas chamber.
Guilty of being a creep. If you're interested in what we're talking about, check out the review of the late Mr. Kent in the archives at DCAUreview.com.
Absolutely. It's a great episode. But, yeah, he's good in his minor appearance. And I will mention, just briefly, before we get to the main players, Robert Ito, who, of course, played Kyodai Ken / the Ninja, has a small voice cameo as the awards presenter at the start of the episode. So cool to see another familiar name in the credits there. And then, yeah, before we get to our main cast, we, of course, have Robert Hayes, who folks may know from the Airplane movies, but we know him, Cal, as the true voice, Robert Downey Jr. can suck it, of Iron Man.
Hashtag my Iron Man.
That's right. Hashtag.
That's right. He was, he played Iron Man in the, I guess there were two seasons or 3 seasons of the...
I believe 2 seasons.
Animated Iron Man show that was also on Fox Kids on Saturday mornings in the early to mid-90s. He then would go to follow up that performance. He played him in additional series. I believe he played him in the Spider-Man animated series as well that ran on Fox Kids. He also would then go on to play him in the Incredible Hulk series. Probably the X-Men series as well.
They all crossed over at some point.
Yeah, those cartoons were all sort of loosely in the same universe, as we sort of discussed before we went on the air here. But yeah, I was today years old when I realized that he was also the voice of Edward Lightner.
Well, I think, and it's a credit to his ability as an actor, because he doesn't sound like he had a very specific kind of like cool guy, raspy voice when he voiced Iron Man. He's had a very very calm, cool,
underperforming,
underperforming, cool, calm, collected voice as Iron Man.
You really hear it when he's doing the voiceover for the death traps. If you listen to those voiceovers when he comes over the radio in Lois's car, or when he jumps, when he's speaking to Lois when she's in the elevator, you really hear it. That's when I was like, man, that voice sounds so familiar. I don't know what I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something there that I recognize, and that to me most resembles that voice of Iron Man
for sure. But yeah, his regular sort of Edward Lightner voice is quite different. So credit to him again as an actor. He did a fantastic job, and like I said, because we have one scene with him earlier in the episode where he reveals to Lois and Clark that the technology is from LexCorp. And then we don't see him again until the end there when we have that reveal. But I also think he does a good job in that scene where he's kind of calm and talking about how, television's a waste and a distraction, whatever. And then the light bulb goes off and he realizes that she's found him out. And that switch to being more of a traditional psycho villain. I think he did a very good job with that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think his performance is really good. Of course, we know, as we've already stated, he comes back just a few episodes after this, so we get a follow-up where he's definitely more of a focal point in that. There's a lot more work that he does in that follow-up episode. But yeah, kudos to him. I think what you pointed out, his ability to sort of be that sort of just normal, run-of-the-mill guy, and then he sort of switches to a more sinister-sounding voice, especially in that scene where Lois really discovers, she puts 2 and 2 together, and then when he puts 2 and 2 together to figure out that she's figured it out, there's a switch sort of in the way that he speaks, and it's very creepy, very creepy.
Yes. Yeah.
Done very well.
Absolutely. Great job by Mr. Hayes in this episode. And then, of course, we have our main cast. We have just 3 of them this week. Briefly, we have Clancy Brown as Lex Luthor, which is interesting because he's really an ally to Lois in this episode. Like, he genuinely is concerned for her and mentions that he'll do everything he can. And in fact, that's the only reason that Superman gets to her in time to save her at the end, is because he calls Lois to let her know that this shipment of technology had gone missing just after Lightner had been fired, and Superman or Clark is able to put it together. So it is interesting to see Lex sort of, despite being this, the villain of this series, for whatever reason. I know it's mentioned in the pilot that they dated briefly, like whether it's like he just has a soft spot for Lois, or if it's just it wouldn't be sporting to kill her this way or whatever, but he is like a genuine help in this episode. It is interesting to see him cast that way.
Another in a long line of killing machines. It's not as much fun when you're on the receiving end.
I heard about the regrettable incident at the Excalibur Awards.
Yes, and this little goodie was in my car. I have evidence it was manufactured here at LexCorp.
Really, Lois, I wouldn't leave so blatant a trail, even if I were out to get you.
And you're not?
No. Why would I be? I respect you and what you do, even when you're taking pot shots at my company.
But the device...
This disturbs me as much as it does you. If it came from LexCorp, I'll find out how it ended up in your car. I promise. Trust me, Lois.
Trust him? Why would you do that? He's just trying to keep you from nosing around LexCorp.
Probably. But I believed him when he said he wasn't behind it. The way this assassin keeps warning me, it's like he wants me to suffer first.
Liam, do you like your Lex Luthor with shades of gray, or do you prefer him to be a straight-up supervillain?
Well, as a Smallville fan, I think I have to say that I prefer the idea that he's not completely gone, or
right.
At least there are certain people that maybe he is softer on than others, and I think that works here. But also, what we can also see, again, playing off, I think, something that happens in the pilot is he has, like, this weird contempt for Clark Kent, which is, of course, hilarious because it's also Superman. But, like, I think it's in the first episode, Clark mentioned something about how, this, when Corbin steals the robot, you could actually get a really big insurance payment, and you get to design an even bigger robot for the U.S. government to counteract the one they just stole. And he's like, okay, Mr. Kent. And then that's very much like referenced subtly here when he's giving him a message. You got that, Kent?
He's berating him for whether or not he's able to capture a few sentences of information about the origins of this technology.
That's right.
Hello?
Kent, I was hoping to speak to Lois.
She's not here.
Then take a note.
I've traced the material she was asking about. It was part of a lot that went missing from inventory right after her little snitch Lightner was fired. Did you get that, Kent? Hello?
Hello?
Clark literally leaves the phone off the hook, thus foiling Lex once again.
There's some good dynamic with that, and Clancy Brown does a good job. It's definitely, I felt like listening to his performance, he did do a subtle difference in the way that he delivers his lines here. It doesn't have that quite as hard of an edge. He does when he's talking to Clark on the phone. That's when it kind of comes through. But in his interaction with Lois, and there's a sort of lighter, calmer, more peaceful tone to it without that sort of subtle edge that Clancy Brown typically does.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really interesting performance even in sort of the minor role that he's in today. But
For sure.
Is, of course, always fantastic there. We have, of course, the main guy, Tim Daly, as Superman. And again, he's sort of he's the secondary player. He's kind of the sidekick to.
I think there's more Clark in this episode,
yes,
isn't there?
Yeah, he's sort of along for the ride on Lois's investigation more than anything. But he has a solid job again in some of these smaller interactions when he's offering to stay at Lois's place and everything, and he's trying to show genuine concern. But of course, she, thinking of him as just Clark Kent, is like you might as well just murder me.
Right.
Like, having Clark Kent there as her protector is about the same as not having anyone as far as she's concerned. So it's funny to see that interaction play out. But of course, the true star of this episode has to be Lois Lane, Dana Delaney, who we've always sung the praises of. She's the Lois Lane. And as you mentioned, because this episode so focuses on her and her investigation and her vulnerability, she gets to really kind of stretch her legs a little bit and show us, I think, a few different sides of Lois, while, as we talked about in plot, still giving you that crusader for the truth that you would expect from Lois Lane.
Yeah, she really, she starts out at the beginning sort of brushing this off, and it's just, it's not really a big deal. Maybe she's a little bit rattled, but she gets more and more shaken sort of as the episode goes on, and then it culminates with this dream that she has with somebody throwing her over the edge, and she it feels like she's at a breaking point where she's just going to lose it, and then she sort of snaps back to realize like who she is. It's like, oh, I'm Lois, I'm Lois Lane. I'm like, I can figure this out. I can put two and two together. Like, I'm not going to let this guy like mentally torture me. Like I'm not going to give in to what exactly he's telling me that he wants me to do, and I'm going to figure it out. And her performance comes off that way. She does a really, really excellent job. She, like you said, she has a wide range of certainly of emotion that she has to express, from the the inquisitive reporter angle to like I said, the more rattled, like frightened, terrified thought of the unknown and whether or not this guy's going to succeed in killing her, to the more to kind of anywhere in between there. She does a really, really good job. Newsflash. she's really good. Absolutely.
Not a surprise, but it was cool to see her get to really kind of flex her muscles here and show off what a great actress she is. And yeah, so for all these reasons, the strong performances from our leads as well as our guest actors, I actually gave voice acting a perfect 10 out of 10 this week.
Wow, nice. Yeah, I gave it a 9 out of 10. I think it is really, really strong. There wasn't one scene that I thought that necessarily drew out to me that was like, yes, this is incredible. There wasn't one thing that really stood out as like this deserves a 10 out of 10 type performance. But I don't fault you for giving it a 10 out of 10 either.
Yeah, I think my because I think I originally had it at a 9, and then I just felt like the ensemble is so good rather than one or two of them really lifting it for everyone else. I just think it's the ensemble cast there it does such a good job of playing off each other. We talk all the time about Andrea Romano's strength as a voice director, as well as the advantages of having people be able to record their dialogue in the same room with each other and be able to play off each other directly.
Certainly.
I'm sure certainly helped in this case as well. So yeah, just a great job by everyone around, and everyone working with each other in this episode did a great job.
Absolutely. All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to our final score. Oh! That's a sound we haven't heard in just a little bit. First one of the new year. It's a bonus point sound effect there, and it's not mine. So, Liam, it's yours.
That's right. It's such a surprise we didn't even discuss it before we went on the air. I thought of it about halfway through the episode, but it is for the scene where Lois is in the elevator. Superman stops it, and when he opens the door, he happens to repeat a line that was said by one Christopher Reeve, playing the same character, Superman, in Superman 2.
I believe this is your floor.
I'm not having a good day.
Which is, I believe this is your floor. And it's funny because we get little tweaks or homages. We talk a lot about the Fleischer influences, but to have like a direct sort of a new Superman giving one of, for a lot of people, Christopher Reeve's Superman is the Superman, I think, especially in live action.
For sure.
So to have Tim Daly give his rendition of that line in sort of a direct reference to a specific scene from one of those movies, I thought that deserved a special shout out for that.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, that's one of those blink and you miss it, or if you're not paying attention, you might not quite, or maybe you're not just as big a fan of Superman as you are. So yeah, that's one of those that's easily missed, but you're rewarded if you know what know the homage or get the reference. So that's really, really cool. All right, Liam. Well, then that will bring us to our final scores for this week's episode. Totaling everything up on my side of things, I end up with a surprisingly strong 30 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, and I'm a little bit higher than that. I'm at 34 out of 40.
Nice. All right. Well, let's talk about rewatchability here. I think based solely on the fact that this character plays a part in another episode. He comes back in Justice League Unlimited, I believe.
That's right. I think it's just Justice League.
Or Justice League, yeah, he comes back in Justice League. So this character makes multiple appearances throughout. It is an original character. I don't know if we mentioned that or not, but as far as we can tell, there wasn't much drawn off of as far as comics continuity as far as this character was concerned. So original character developed here. Now, I will say, if you've seen this episode as much as I have, it's not a rewatch. It's not one that I'm going to go back to because I've seen this, as I've already said, countless times in my life. I think going through watching this with a more critical eye and certainly a better appreciation and understanding of what the whole, at least the plot for this episode was, I appreciate this episode on a level that I didn't before rewatching it, years later now. But, so I give this like a 1 thumb up. It's important to the DCAU. It's a must-watch because of that, because of the role he plays later on. But for me, it's not one that I'm going to watch over and over again because I've seen it so many times.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We're kind of in the same boat on that part. This isn't necessarily... I think this episode is, and we will see when we get to those, but my memory is this one got played a lot, but compared to some of the other Lightner appearances, this one didn't get played at all.
Yeah, the second one was definitely shown.
The one where he's where he turns the sun red and...
So many times.
So the subsequent appearances, I think I'm more drained when I think about reviewing those than this one. But definitely because it is the first appearance of a villain that's reoccurring throughout this series and others, I definitely think it's worth watching. And if you haven't watched it at all before, it's a great Lois story as well. So, I definitely think it's good and one of those that actually benefited, I think, from us looking at it a bit more critically and less from a fan, I've seen this so many times perspective. I think that actually helped it in this case.
Absolutely. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap this week's episode up. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, if you have not heard our prior episodes discussing Superman the Animated Series, there's an easy way for you to go and access those. You can check out the archives at DCAUreview.com. You can actually sort right on the website by series. So if you're curious what episodes we've covered before from Superman or Justice League or any of these ones that we don't review in order, the Batman episodes and the Batman Beyond ones we do review in order, so those whatever the last episode that we've covered, we review those in production order. So you can kind of figure out if we've reviewed some of the newer episodes of Batman Animated Series by looking at that. But if you're curious about what episodes we've covered as far as Superman or Justice League Unlimited or Static Shock, you can check those all out at DCAUreview.com, broken down by category. If you're interested on what episodes that we loved the most, there's actually a top picks section that lists just the best of the best, our top favorite picks thus far across the DCAU. Don't forget, you can also follow us on social media at DCAU Review, easy for me to say, on Twitter and on Instagram. Liam does a great job over there on Twitter. We love interacting with people and certainly hearing your thoughts. What are your thoughts on this episode? Was this one that you saw a lot, remember being in heavy rotation like us? Did you appreciate it for the mystery that it was at the time, or maybe you've always loved that? Let Liam know. Tweet him at DCAU Review. Liam, as we always say, we like to preview our episodes. We give kind of sneak peeks earlier on Twitter, kind of letting people know what we're going to be covering on there. So if you follow us, you already know. But let's reveal what we're going to be discussing on next week's episode.
That is right, Cal, and we are keeping up with our themes of first appearances in the series of various Superman villains, with another one, a classic sort of Golden and Silver Age foe who has just one appearance in the DCAU, but what a memorable one it is. And that will be the giant ape Titano. We will, of course, be talking about the episode Monkey Fun right here next week.
Ah, yes, our friends at Tim Talk, those guys love that episode from my recollection. They tried to argue it into the top 5 DCAU
Hoop
episodes
Squad,
of all time.
Monkey Fun.
What are we doing?
Over the Edge.
We love those guys, though.
Yeah, they're great.
All right, so until next week, though, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.